Hello there, I'm Charles Owen from valueofeverything.net podcast. I submit regular shows on social economic subject matter and attempt to predict future trends. Recently, I had been listening to TZM Global Radio. James Phillip was on and he was giving a speech about how the listeners should provide content for the show. I have decided to take up that challenge. The Zeitgeist movement is very enlightening to me. It does definitely see a different perspective. I very much welcome that, and I do believe that we share a common goal to make the world a better place. I do hope that the Zeitgeist movement is open to new lines of thought, and we potentially could find a way to unshackle humanity from its chains. So, this is going to be a slightly different variant to what the general Zeitgeist movement style is. I have done previous shows in regards to the Zeitgeist movement and the Venus Project. I do believe that some of the predictions that I was making did slightly strawman the arguments made and conflated between the Venus Project and the Zeitgeist movement. So I do apologize for that. What I'm going to try and do now is I'm going to dovetail a few ideas which is coming through together between what's happening in the tech industry with the ideas of the Zeitgeist movement and see where that takes us. TZM is a very interesting way of reformulating society based upon its value systems. And I believe that there is a potential to change that way of thinking into a decentralized method of changing values, and then potentially using the weapons of, and this is going to probably scare a lot of people at this point, scarcity, speculation, and money to change the channels of thinking. So you're probably going, oh my God, this man's a crazy person going on the Zeitgeist movement trying to do this. But I'm going to try and show you an example. And at the very least, I believe that this podcast will provide you'll get an idea of what potentially could happen in the future, certain things that could arise. Maybe this is potentially the other enemy that might be on the scene. Maybe this is a way that the Zeitgeist movement could channel certain ideas and thoughts. And I think this is going to be beneficial for everybody here. So, I will definitely agree on a lot of the arguments of the Zeitgeist movement. I definitely do not agree with us living in a throwaway culture, distorting the life support systems of Earth. I think that money is definitely a root cause of how society is becoming broken. And yeah, there is problems with capitalism on scarcity. So I think we definitely are together on a lot of this subject matter so far. I'm going to just start tackling a few things which I did with my previous podcast. I think my previous podcast was a bit slow and boring, so I'm going to try and jazz this up a little bit more and just put in a few punts against the Zeitgeist movement. Just be prepared for that. Obviously, you're probably ready with all your counter arguments before we've even started, but I'll try and keep this as civil as possible. And I'm going to just show you how we can just convert a few little tweaks here and there and potentially get it working. So, currently, we have a system of money and everybody has to work, steal and hustle to get on by, and it really isn't much of a fantastic system. It's really it's a case of us acquiring resources, getting finance to acquire these assets which have compounding interest, and all of a sudden you can sit back, be a fat cat, and not really do much for society and live off the fat of the land. The money system, the monetary system and governance does create some awful ills in society, and I believe that we are in agreement here. Now, I need to take us way, way back now to the idea of sex, because I think this is where one of the areas in which I think that class system should exist, but a different type of class system. Maybe Zeitgeist movement is in agreement with me here, but I believe that sex is definite. It's got to exist at some extent, or society does break down in a lot of ways. So, for starters, we have male and female. On the male side, sperm is abundant. So, males search for fertility, so strength, and even features in the woman for survival purposes. Then on the other side, we have females who have eggs, which are very scarce, and they are very much into hypergamy. They are looking for a high status, high resource receiving man who can provide their child's life security. These are just the bases of survival and reproduce. This is the main code and fabric of humanity. So we need to definitely explore that and understand that if we do have this idea of blurring the world of property rights, it does create some ills. Now, money and sex. We do understand that there is a value of sexual attraction. There's a massive porn industry out there. There is a lot of attractive women that are attracting a lot of very rich men. So we do understand that that exists. And then also there is a value of resource acquisition. So men who, and obviously I'm giving a very basic opinion. Obviously you can get women who acquire resources, but let's just keep it to the relative standard right now. So men go out and acquire resources. This is to attract the mates to a certain extent, or at least address and appeal to somebody that is of higher status. Now, next up would be that if you created a society which didn't have any class system itself, it's really just a case of nobody really attaining a high class because everybody was just working and there wasn't anything to get to the hypergamous higher class man, then we do create a situation of resource acquirements to be obsolete. And then we do create a situation of overtly hypersexualized society. And we do actually already see this today in the credit expansion world, where also in the benefits world, where basically it is to do with just sexual attraction and not too much about finding a mate who is good at providing. So this is just one of those topics. Obviously, there's probably plenty of arguments to go back and forth on this, on these items of money and sex, but it's what exists now, and it's an ill to society in a lot of respects. Now, class system does exist. It's basically interwoven with money itself. The more money that you have, usually that you are of a higher class, you are a higher social status. There is an element of power that gets wielded with this as well. If you become into the government and you're a leader of a country, power is connected to money, and it is this ever connecting pit of, if you think that money is the root of all evil, then you do create this society structure based purely upon acquisition, power, and doing everything you can to still hustle and get your workers to work for you. So we do understand that this is the class society structure that we're living in, and we do understand the sexual nature of all of us, and these are the things which are occurring. Now, the class system may be negative if our structural framework of resource acquisition was potentially changed. Obviously, we can understand that money dictates our class system, but I will make a suggestion here, and this is going to be an interesting point. What if we can, and I know that Zeitgeist movement are looking to change the value system itself, what if we could make money the root of all good, rather than the root of all evil, make money the root of all good? Now, you may be raising your eyebrows here and thinking, how on earth do you do this? But there is potential means of doing this with the advent of new technology, which is coming around the corner. And I will try and divulge a certain number of ideas which are coming around, especially the blockchain. Okay, so one of the problems with TZM is the incentive to start the movement. It's very difficult to create a working example of society because they are sitting side by side capitalism, which is using unsustainable cheap resources in comparison to very expensive sustainable resources, and therefore the living standards of comparing between the two is very tricky. So you could potentially say that it may require economic or environmental destruction, or even potentially just good communication, good education to convert the people, or even maybe go to the extent of using military force to convert the people. But it really isn't the good measure. It's either immoral, or you're just going to be waiting around sitting on your hands forevermore without anything happening. You could say that there has been a lot of information, a lot of work in the background that has been happening, but the benchmark is the working example of society for people to convert over. So how does that happen? Now, there is one way to create it, and it's the oldest trick in the book, and that is to empathize with the individual and to tap into their self-interest. Now, it's very hard to surrender to a system when it really depends on unlocking the individual's potential. So, I mean, after a time, you potentially would flourish a society who would become selfless. But if you could potentially gear the society's monetary and value systems, then people could become the change that they want to see in the world. We could produce something of value to humanity and be rewarded. And then also, obviously, you could have people in society who are leeching off and become rejected. Just don't be too queasy about rejection. Rejection is a force of good. You can reject the elites who are just siphoning off all the money. You can reject people who are leeching at the very bottom of class of society as well. It is a good system in which ill means or immoral means are rejected. Now, where are we going with this? I'm going to go into the statement of abundance. Obviously, the Zeitgeist movement wants to move to a world in which there is abundance and plenty of food for everyone to live on, and that is a wondrous thing, and I would love that myself. Obviously, we both know that abundance cannot be achieved. There will be random natural events which would occur, and there is finite resources. Human desires are unbounded, and with abundance you do create certain wastes. So it's you could never really obtain abundance, and I'm sure that TZM is quite aware of that themselves. But in this respect, you can, if you flip the argument on its head, you can have a war on scarcity. You can unleash hell on scarcity and use potentially weapons of capitalism to fight against an evil of capitalism itself. Okay, I'm going to explore the collaborative design systems from the Zeitgeist movement, CDS. This is a programmed open source code which will allocate the resources to the individuals. Now, there is problems with this, and I think this is one of the block points for TZM, and potentially they could find a way around this, and I'm just going to explain that in a short while. They have to submit researched work. There has to be some kind of reviewing panel for that. There has to be surveys of the world's resources, and you have to get some kind of funding for that to happen. So resource allocation has to happen on that basis. And who decides this resource allocation as well? Okay, so let's go into a few questions, and then I will try and answer each one of those in terms of the CDS. So, how does a system cater to our needs and wants? I would imagine it will be to calculate the sustainability of materials, production complexity, the utility, and trending known desires. Very complicated stuff. The next question would be, how do you decide environmental impact on sustainability? So what if the direction was global freezing and the system was too hard to reverse? There would be a little bit of an issue here. And what if there was a little bit of a moral question and there was a lesser evil option to make between environmental impact of one area to another? And how would that be decided? Very complicated in those respects there. The production time would be, I guess, calculated based upon scalability and innovations which were delivered at the same point. So you've got a few little issues here as well, where demand can be small at first and then large at the end. Predicting demand can be hugely economical and have a good environmental effect as well. However, incorrectly predicting can be quite disastrous, and you do have a lot of waste with the abundance which is created. If utility is our number one goal, then we create an emphasis on meeting humans' needs. But what happens to art and culture? What happens when we just give all the life support systems for humans and we get rampant population growth? How is utility decided? So if it's life supports, obviously we do have that exponential growth thing, and we may have to reverse for the environmental sake, and it's going to be too late. If we're trying to meet happiness, so the happiness of humanity, then there's another little balancing measure that you have to apply here as well. Is it all short-term and hedonism, or is it long-term? And then people don't really find much of an incentive to life. We don't really get to enjoy our weekends or anything like that, because we're all just working for this better life in the future that is so far ahead. We do fall into a conundrum as well of a centralized source philosophizing and choosing what is best for us. And we do get to a state of only ourselves can choose that path. And after all of these things which are occurring and centrally planned, we do have this majority rule system which is being created. We potentially find ourselves disconnecting, potentially becoming lazy and really not working as a symbiotic object within the economic system. The vote system, majority rule, how is that all measured? Is it some kind of weighted average? Is it some people make better decisions than others, therefore they get more voting rights? It's a very complicated thing where you do have voting systems and there is the ability to count ballot boxes. It does create problems. You will find disconnect throughout society. Okay, so the most important thing to expect where you do create a collaborative design system is that you have to, and this is so important, to expect failure. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong. It's a massive, massive issue. Some of the design mechanisms that could be created could be irreversible and be damaging to the environment, could be damaging to mankind. There is multiple problems with creating one singular CDS system which has all the power. It has some kind of majority rule system going on. So I'm all about power to the people. And the best way to combat this issue is to create multiple CDSs rather than a singular CDS. If you have multiple CDSs, which maybe not quite as large scope as a CDS system, which covers every single social economic system which occurs, but goes into maybe recycling air, or when I say recycling, but improving air quality or improving sea quality, then we do have a system of values which has been created which people can quickly lend their value and efforts into and then move into a different arena or a different CDS, these little small tiny pocket CDS systems, which are high programmed to be specified in doing certain moral good things. So one analogy I like to make is that the universe that we live in is a multiverse, because gravity is so fine-tuned that there is no understandable theory as to why it could be so finely tuned, that there must be multiverses that are created with different gravity pulls and pushes. So this way, one system can exist, but we need to have fine-tuning on multiple levels of different CDS positions, all competing with each other for creating the best good for mankind. Okay, hopefully I'm still with you here. And this is where you're probably going to diverge a little bit from me now, but we know how to allocate resources the best in this world. The fastest method, the most technologically efficient way to allocate resources is speculation. Now, speculation in today's age is a little bit different. If you bodge up and you're a big multinational corporate company, you can go to the government and get the taxpayers to sort of forfeit any other costs. But if you did have speculation based upon the individual, so you own your own body, you own your own production, you own your own fuck-ups as well, then if you speculate and it is incorrectly speculated that the market is going to go in one direction and you have chosen incorrectly, you will own that loss. And therefore, it's not hitting everybody else. It's not like we're socializing the costs of bad choices, which in general happens with governance. So these speculators go into the market, they put out their ideas, they put their, let's say, bets on certain ideas, and if they get validated, then they continue on to be these voting agents, and if they are incorrect, they get falsified, and they obviously are doing the least amount of good to society. Now, you're thinking, okay, well, this is capitalism here, they're probably greedy monsters who are really earning off the fat of the land, but I will go into a little bit later as to the virtue coins as well, and if they're working in that arena, they're actually working for the betterment of mankind, not necessarily for their own pure self-interest. So, what I'm suggesting here is obviously CDS systems. These, I would say, are pretty much blockchains which are competing against each other. Within these blockchains, there are speculators who are putting on predictions, and these predictions are being the resource allocations. These speculators are also becoming the environment managers. They are actually detecting whether there is a particular problem in the environment and then placing their bets as to finance ventures. And it's actually to finance miners, but I will go into that in a little bit later. The speculators are being the moral choice makers as well. This may feel a little bit queasy for you as well, but I will go into all of these if we put our minds into a metric of speculators being moral agents rather than speculators working from the background of greed. Also, in terms of a collaborative design system, is that if you have multitudes of collaborative design systems, particularly if they were designed for the betterment of humanity, if one does start to collapse or there is a problem with one, with the fine-tuning of the mechanisms of how it's all structured, there is firewalls between each one of these ecosystems or economic systems. So there is divisions of the economy, and therefore there isn't a complete disaster. We can go from one side to the other. This is very interesting as well, and I'll make this case a little bit later, how if society or the globe was in one mode as to, say, clean the water, then all of a sudden the world was at peril with a meteorite going straight at us, then the speculators could funnel in the money rapidly into designing, I don't know, nuclear bombs that can blow up in outer space to take the meteorite off its trajectory, if I can say the word. Okay, so let's say that prices reflect all market data. Now, it's very hard to suggest that that happens in today's age. There is a lot of government involvement with all the pricing mechanisms which are around there today. But we will have an element of prices and values, and we would understand that the price of things and the value of things would join closer together as to what humans' values are in comparison to what materialism is. Another thing to actually consider as well is that with the market, you do have a voting machine, which is occurring here. Over time, this is what Benjamin Graham has stated, is that you do have a weighing machine, which is really balancing the markets to create equilibrium, as the neoclassical like to theorize, but it does create some kind of balancing measure of moral agency.
We all want to help one another. It's a beautiful quality to humans. Most of us want a happier and healthier world to live in. We've never harnessed that to any degree. Now, I'm going to talk about ASCI graphics cards and moral principles. The Bitcoin blockchain was created in 2009 as a method to decentralize the monetary system from state intervention. Bitcoins were awarded to miners who could crack an increasingly harder cryptographic puzzle. Bitcoins were worth nothing beyond the accomplishment of achieving a high score on an arcade game. Some people like to cheat games. There's a big market in it. So the first transaction occurred. 1 pizza for 1 million Bitcoins. From there, an exchange system was created. Bitcoin is perceived as a secure means to exchange value which cannot be manipulated by the state. As Bitcoin increased in value, an arms race ensued for the best ASCI graphics card, which could flip over the most combinations, hashes, to solve the puzzle. Cheating, scarcity, and abundance may sound like a story of sin, but I shall continue. That being said, we have a reward system which couldn't be manipulated by man. On this framework, 2 important things have happened. Moral pursuit for non-colluded money, and a tech race to solve ever harder problems. Okay, now I'm going to explain another interesting phenomenon. In December 2013, Bitcoin peaked. 1 Bitcoin cost $1,240. From there, Bitcoin's price dropped off a cliff and stayed in the low hundreds. Regardless of market fluctuations, miners mined even at a loss. The tech race continued even when the incentive was pulled underneath them. Miners will continue their efforts in the hope for a change in the price. So you could think in a certain analogy, factories are still producing even when there is nothing back in return. So let's break down proof of concept on how you can make a multitude of collaborative design systems, which becomes a unit of exchange themselves. 4 factors are: find a virtuous pursuit for humanity, an idea of how it could be sustained to an autonomous level, a metric to calculate beneficial rate of change, preventative measures to stop metric manipulation. That last bit is key to whether success or failure will happen. Let's apply that to the Bitcoin blockchain. So there's been created a unit of exchange which cannot be adulterated. This is on a decentralized virtual accounting ledger, peer-to-peer network. The reward system is increasingly harder to extract. On the secure level, cryptographic protection of the ledger. Only faster mining computers with better hash rates is a method to extract bitcoins. There isn't a way to cheat a sequence of numbers. Now, as a strange consequence of Bitcoin, we have produced faster hash rate graphics cards. Let's abstract this and insert as we feel best for a new micro CDS. This example I'm going to try and provide here is Aircoin. We want to filter air from pollution. This will happen with independent solar panel machines filtering, self-cleaning, and self-disposing of waste. Aircoins will be awarded to miners for, say, 2% improvement in air quality for their zone or territory. And to make sure that this is all going above board, independent survey miners will check the improvements of air quality and check the quality of the surveys of the other miners at work. Okay, so we have clean air solved. Next up, property rights. Let's set some basic principles. We own our own bodies. We wouldn't stand for anyone dictating otherwise, doing harm to us or doing anything against our will. We have personal space and we are consciously aware of it. We own our production. If you had painstakingly painted on canvas for hours, I walked up and ripped it apart, I'm sure you wouldn't take kindly to me. So, empathy is experienced by understanding another person's condition from their perspective. When we blur lines of property ownership, people disconnect from being humane. We become some kind of robot with machine minds. Accountability, metrics, surveys, units of exchange, and resource allocation cannot exist without property as a concept. So let's explore owning ideas, i.e. intellectual property rights, with this example. Okay, you come up with an idea to build a better shelter and share that idea with me. A beautiful act of generosity has occurred. Next up, you've taken time out of your productive day, where you could have produced some food, to invent a new medicine. I have gratefully taken this idea and improved my life. However, you still are missing out on your day's work and resent your efforts. So hard work should be rewarded. All right, back to intellectual property rights. Let's use a couple of principles again. No idea is original. Nobody invents something completely from scratch. People take ideas, put them together, and falsify them to test their validity. Ideas are abundant and resources are finite. Yet there is this element of work which occurs when an innovation happens. So let's put forward the moral principle that when an innovation has occurred, you have put some work in, you are rewarded by that. However, you do want to release the ideas into the framework. You do not want to have a load of patent lawyers going around the world trying to sue everybody. You want to share information to free mankind. You could produce a system where people upload their ideas. There could be a database on this peer-to-peer network where everybody recognizes that these are the ideas that have been created beforehand. Let's just use the analogy of a computer script. Say I've produced something which is 100% of my script, and then somebody takes my script and then applies an extra 5% to that code. Then a value coin is distributed to the innovator. So you could work in a world of pattern recognition and keeping databases and search engines. You could have some kind of reward system. This is an important step for producing more with less energy and matter. So, as I mentioned before, there's some kind of royalty recognition which is occurring when there is a certain level of percentage change to an idea. And I guess you would have independent survey miners as well who would check the improvements. They would be using an algorithm, they'll be using pattern recognitions to see how this idea is original or there is a bit of plagiarism which is occurring. Another little interesting concept here as well is that you could have this market flourish very quickly by allowing people to steal other people's ideas. That would create an influx for people to jump on board and upload ideas at a rapid pace so that it would be adopted rather quickly. Okay, next up would be a logistics coin. So you could put out the moral principle that it is much more efficient to move businesses and productive means closer together. You could have a number of miners which are trying to detect any efficiencies in the market which could occur by putting a farm next to a populated area and providing a reward for doing so. Another idea would be a cooperative coin where all the workers at the lower levels are equally being distributed as much as the CEOs at the top level. I guess another important thing to mention as well is that where we do not have the corporation, people are really owning their own decisions. So therefore, if there was any problems or occurrences, you are not protected by the legal frameworks of the corporation, but you have to take responsibility for your actions. Going back to the innovation coin or the value coin, you are creating products which are very much so bespoke to the consumer. They are using ideas which have got more durability, more of ability to change over the components and the parts. You are potentially living in a deflationary environment where the money supply is becoming less so and less so, so therefore people are constraining and being more environmentally inclined. This would be very handy, especially in the environment of 3D printers and robotics, where you could continuously add on to scripts to produce better, more durable goods which are everlasting better quality. There is obviously options as well for a share economy. If you are exchanging these goods and these materials on a market, you could even apply these principles to a blockchain coin as well. Then there is definitely mechanisms in which you can improve sustainability for the finite resources on Earth. So really, to tie everything up, I am suggesting solid state value collaboration systems, a multitude of them rather than one singular powerful source which has a high degree for failure. So hopefully I've given you a few good examples of how blockchain technology and CDS systems could be combined to create a better world. We definitely can say that our value system has been wildly distorted. Like a moth to a flame, we are guided to material progress. Greed and fear is hijacking us, and fear pushes our drive, yet we have nothing to fear but fear itself. Our drive is but an empty vacuum. I do believe I am with TZM in terms of reversing that greed and fear and having humanity driven by generosity and courage to bring out the best in man. There is joy to work if you've accomplished something good, but sadly in today's monetary system, even if it is good, it's hard to sustain. This world doesn't owe us a living. We owe it to ourselves to create our freedom and prosperity. A few good men cannot change the world. There seems to be so much work to do, yet no way of starting. We've never been so intelligent, yet underutilized. Imagine a governance which was the will of the people. I guess we could imagine that currently we have a dry lake where dreams are absorbed by the mud cracks. Now, with the CDS system or a multitude of CDS systems, we have a trickle of sporadic rain. Our dreams cannot be squandered forever. The cracks can begin to fill and muddy puddles will link up. The reverberating droplets fill the stream of human progress until the banks of our fear and illusion will subside into an ocean of unthinkable wonder. governance can be subservient to the people's needs. Multiple virtuous speculations can predict the market. If speculation is channeled into a track of virtue coins, then we have created a market of selfless, self-fulfilling enterprise. Thank you very much for your time. If you would like any further information, visit valueofeverything.net. I'm Charles Owen. Let's keep the idea